The sound of that slap didn't just hit my face, it split my soul in two. The Admiral, my superior, my supposed mentor, struck me across the face in front of hundreds, on my wedding day, in uniform. The hall froze. My veil fell. The crowd gasped. And when he leaned in and said, "This is the only gift you deserve from me," I tasted blood and shame together. My husband turned, his jaw tight. "Then this will be your last gift, Admiral," he whispered. "Like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from, because what happened next made every officer in that room wish they had stepped in when they still could. But let me back up. Let me tell you who I was before that bastard tried to break me. My name is Lieutenant Claire Morrison, former Navy SEAL. 8 years of service, 4 deployments, 1 spotless record. I earned every stripe, every medal, every goddamn commendation through blood, sweat, and sacrifice that most people can't even imagine. I was the daughter who made her father proud when he pinned my first badge with trembling hands. I was the soldier who carried wounded teammates through enemy fire without hesitation. I was the woman who proved that courage doesn't have a gender. Until one man decided that respect was something he could take with a slap. You want to know what real humiliation feels like? It's not the physical pain that fades. It's standing in a room full of people who know your worth, watching them do nothing while someone destroys everything you've built. It's the silence that follows violence, when hundreds of voices go quiet because they're too shocked, too afraid, or too complicit to speak. The wedding ceremony was supposed to be perfect. Naval Base Chapel, morning light streaming through stained glass, my dress uniform crisp and proud beside my husband's. I'd dreamed of this moment since I was a little girl watching my parents renew their vows in the same chapel. This was my sanctuary, my home, my family. Then Admiral Harrison walked in like a storm cloud ready to unleash hell. "Stop this ceremony," he commanded, his voice cutting through the organ music like a blade. The chaplain froze mid-sentence. My bouquet trembled in my hands. I will not stand by and watch this disgrace unfold in sacred space. The guests shifted uncomfortably. My mother's face went pale. My father's hands clenched into fists. But I stood there, trying to process what was happening, trying to understand why my superior officer was destroying the most important day of my life. "You think wearing that badge hides your betrayal?" he snarled, stepping closer. His breath reeked of whiskey and rage. "You think putting on white makes you pure?" I tried to speak, tried to defend myself, but he wasn't done. The words that came next will haunt me forever. "This is for what you did in Kandahar. This is for the men who died because of your cowardice." Then came the slap. The sound echoed through that chapel like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side, my veil catching the morning light as it fell. The sting spread across my cheek like fire, but the real pain was deeper. It was the shattering of everything I believed about honor, respect, and justice. I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. I just stood there, bleeding dignity in front of my own parents, feeling the eyes of every person I'd ever served with burning into my soul. The cameras flashed, because of course there were reporters, because military weddings are always news, because my humiliation was about to become public entertainment. "This is the only gift you deserve from me," he whispered, close enough that only I could hear. Then he turned and walked out, leaving me standing at the altar with blood on my lip and shame in my heart. My husband's voice was deadly quiet when he spoke. "Then this will be your last gift, Admiral." The ceremony ended before it began. Guests filed out in uncomfortable silence. The chaplain mumbled apologies. The photographers kept shooting, capturing every moment of my destruction for tomorrow's headlines. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom, still wearing my wedding dress, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The bruise was already forming, a purple shadow that would fade in days. But the real damage was invisible, carved into my spirit with surgical precision. The media frenzy started before dawn. Disgraced SEAL bride assaulted by superior officer. Wedding day violence rocks naval base. Military investigates domestic dispute. Every headline twisted the truth, turning my humiliation into entertainment, my pain into profit. Command issued my suspension letter the same day. Effective immediately, pending investigation into conduct unbecoming an officer. No hearing, no due process, no chance to defend myself. Just a form letter that erased 8 years of service with the stroke of a pen. My mother collapsed watching the news coverage. Seeing her daughter's face on television, bruised and broken, was more than her heart could bear. My father caught her as she fell, his own tears mixing with hers as they held each other on our living room floor. "I'm so sorry, baby," my mother whispered when I knelt beside her. "I'm so sorry we couldn't protect you." But the worst part wasn't the media circus or the suspension or even my mother's tears. It was the silence from my fellow officers. The men and women I'd served with, bled with, trusted with my life. They said nothing. No calls, no visits, no words of support. Just deafening silence that told me everything I needed to know about military loyalty when it really mattered. That slap wasn't punishment. It was a warning to every woman who ever dared rise higher than a man thought she should. It was a message written in humiliation and delivered with violence. Know your place, or we'll put you there ourselves. For 3 days, I lay in that bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. The anger was there, burning like acid in my chest, but it was buried under layers of shock and shame. I kept thinking about my teammates who didn't make it home, wondering if they'd be proud of how their sacrifice was being used to destroy me. Then my father knocked on my door. "Claire, we need to talk." He was holding a manila folder, the kind he used to bring home from his intelligence analyst days. His face was grim, determined, and angrier than I'd ever seen him. "I've been digging," he said, settling into the chair beside my bed. "That son of a bitch didn't slap you because of Kandahar. He slapped you because of what you know about Kandahar." The folder contained encrypted mission logs, casualty reports, communication transcripts, documents that painted a very different picture of what happened during my last deployment. According to official records, our squad suffered casualties due to my tactical error. According to the real files my father had access through old intelligence contacts, Admiral Harrison had falsified those reports to cover up his own catastrophic command decisions. "Operation Silent Thunder," my father said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "You were ordered to secure a compound that intelligence said was abandoned. But Harrison knew it wasn't. He sent you into a trap to eliminate witnesses to his weapons dealing with local warlords." The pieces fell into place like dominoes. The ambush that killed 3 of my men. The orders that made no tactical sense. The debriefing where Harrison seemed more interested in what I remembered than what I'd accomplished. The rapid reassignment that kept me away from official investigations. "You survived when you weren't supposed to," my father continued. "And now you're getting married, starting a new life, maybe talking to your husband about old missions. He couldn't risk you remembering details that would expose him." I stared at those documents, feeling something shift inside me. The shame was transforming into something harder, cleaner, more dangerous. "He thought public humiliation would break me," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. "He forgot who trained me." My father smiled grimly. "He forgot that Morrisons don't break. We bend until we can strike back." That night, we sat around the kitchen table, my parents, my husband, and me, planning like we were preparing for war. Because that's exactly what we were doing. My father still had contacts in military intelligence, people who owed him favors from decades of service. My mother, a former journalist, knew how to work sources and build cases without leaving fingerprints. My husband, a cybersecurity expert, could navigate digital systems that most people couldn't even access. And me? I knew how to hunt. I knew how to wait. I knew how to strike when my target least expected it. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. We would gather evidence systematically, building an irrefutable case while staying below Harrison's radar. Every document, every witness statement, every digital trail that proved his corruption and my innocence. "This isn't about revenge," my father said as we mapped out our strategy. "This is about justice. There's a difference." But he was wrong. It was absolutely about revenge. Justice was just the method I chose to deliver it. I started with surveillance. Harrison lived in base housing, followed predictable routines, maintained regular schedules. Every morning at 0630, he jogged the same route. Every Tuesday at 1900, he met with the same group of officers at the same off-base bar. Every Friday, he visited the same woman in the same apartment downtown. I cataloged his movements like I was planning an extraction mission. Because in a way, I was extracting the truth from a web of lies, extracting justice from a system designed to protect him, extracting my life from the wreckage he created. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of Harrison's drinking buddies, a Major Collins who'd been present at several classified briefings, approached my father at a veterans event. "Your daughter got a raw deal," he said quietly. "Harrison's been bragging about putting her in her place. Says it was long overdue." Collins provided meeting locations, overheard conversations, details about Harrison's financial irregularities. Not enough for a case, but enough to point us in the right direction. My mother worked her journalism contacts, asking careful questions about military procurement contracts, overseas operations, anything that might connect to Harrison's corruption. She posed as a freelancer researching a broader story about military accountability, never mentioning Harrison by name, but gathering context that would later prove crucial. Meanwhile, I learned everything I could about my target. His service record, his financial history, his personal relationships, his psychological profile. I studied him like I'd studied enemy combatants, looking for weaknesses, patterns, vulnerabilities. The man who destroyed my wedding day was about to discover that he'd picked the wrong enemy. 3 weeks into our investigation, I decided to test the waters. A defense blog called Military Watchdog received an anonymous tip about minor procurement irregularities in Harrison's department. Nothing major, just enough to get attention. The story ran on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, Harrison was on television denying everything. His face was flushed, his voice defensive, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. I watched from my parents' living room, studying his reactions, measuring his fear. Unsubstantiated allegations from disgruntled sources, he declared to reporters. "I've served this country with honor for 23 years. I won't be intimidated by cowards who hide behind anonymous accusations." The story disappeared within 48 hours. Phone calls were made, pressure was applied, the blog issued a retraction citing incomplete information. But I'd seen what I needed to see. Harrison was vulnerable. He was scared. And he was powerful enough to make problems disappear when they were small. That's when I knew we needed irrefutable proof. My husband found the opening we needed. A security audit at the base revealed outdated encryption protocols in the archive system, a vulnerability that would be patched within days, but that could be exploited in the meantime. "It's risky," he warned. "If you're caught accessing classified files without authorization, it's a federal crime. Even if you're proven right about everything else, they could prosecute you for the method." "Then I won't get caught," I replied. Breaking into a military archive wasn't like the movies, no laser grids or pressure sensors, just basic electronic locks and security cameras with predictable patrol patterns. My SEAL training had prepared me for much more challenging infiltrations. I entered the building at 0347 on a moonless Thursday morning, dressed in maintenance coveralls with forged credentials. The night guard was asleep at his desk, another security failure I filed away for later use. The archive was on the 3rd floor, behind a door that yielded to basic lock-picking techniques I'd learned in hostile territory. The files I needed were stored on a secured server that required biometric access. But my husband had prepared for that too, a small device that could bypass the scanner using administrative override codes he'd extracted from the system vulnerability. I had 12 minutes before the next security sweep. I used 10. The mission audio files were exactly where intelligence protocols dictated they should be. Every classified operation generated recorded debriefings, stored in multiple formats as backup against data corruption. Operation Silent Thunder's files contained hours of recorded conversations, but I only needed one. Harrison's voice, clear as daylight, erase Morrison's report. Make her the scapegoat. If anyone asks, she made tactical errors that got her team killed. The investigation ends with her suspension. Another voice, probably his aide, "Sir, that's not what happened." Harrison again, "I don't give a damn what happened. I give a damn what gets reported." Morrison knows too much about our supply arrangements. She needs to be discredited before she starts talking. I copied the files to an encrypted drive, replaced everything exactly as I'd found it, and walked out of that building with my vindication in my pocket. For the first time since that slap, I felt like myself again, competent, dangerous, in control. But Harrison wasn't finished with me yet. The counter-investigation started a week later. Federal agents arrived at our house with a search warrant, tearing through our belongings like they were looking for weapons of mass destruction. They found nothing. We'd been careful to keep all evidence off-site, but the message was clear. Harrison knew we were coming for him, and he was fighting back. The real blow came the next day. My mother was leaving the grocery store when 3 men approached her in the parking lot. They didn't hurt her, not exactly. They just wanted to look at her ID, ask a few questions about her daughter's recent activities, suggest that some investigations were better left to professionals. When she tried to walk away, one of them grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises. She fell, hitting her head on the concrete, blood pooling beneath her gray hair as she lay unconscious. My father called me from the hospital, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "They crossed the line, Claire. They put their hands on your mother." I sat in that waiting room, holding my mother's hand while she slept, staring at the bandage covering her stitches, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. The game had changed. Harrison had made it personal again. He'd forgotten that I was trained to fight wars, not games. The closed-door military tribunal was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Neutral ground, they called it, a conference room in the Pentagon where 3 senior officers would review evidence and render judgment. Harrison walked in confident, his uniform pressed, his bearing proud, surrounded by lawyers and allies. I walked in alone. "Lieutenant Morrison," the presiding officer began, "you've been recalled to active duty for the purpose of this hearing. The charges against you are serious: conduct unbecoming an officer, dereliction of duty, and conspiracy to discredit a superior officer." I stood at attention, my own uniform restored for the first time in months. It felt like armor, like coming home, like reclaiming something sacred that had been stolen from me. "Admiral Harrison," the officer continued, "you've requested this tribunal to address what you've described as a coordinated campaign of harassment and false accusations. Please state your case." Harrison stood, his voice steady and authoritative. "Gentlemen, Lieutenant Morrison has been spreading lies about classified operations in order to deflect attention from her own failures. She's using her father's intelligence connections to access information she has no right to possess. She's turned her family into accomplices in what amounts to treason." He presented his evidence methodically: the anonymous blog posts, the security breach at the archive, witness statements from officers who'd seen me acting suspiciously around base facilities. His case was thorough, professional, and completely believable. When he finished, the room was quiet. 2 of the 3 officers were nodding. This was going exactly as Harrison had planned. Then it was my turn. I placed a small digital recorder on the conference table. The officers leaned forward. Harrison's face went pale. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I'd like you to hear what really happened during Operation Silent Thunder." I pressed play. Harrison's recorded voice filled the room. "Erase Morrison's report. Make her the scapegoat. If anyone asks, she made tactical errors that got her team killed. The silence that followed was deafening. Harrison's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. The three officers exchanged glances that said everything. But I wasn't finished. That recording was made during the classified debriefing following Operation Silent Thunder. Admiral Harrison ordered the falsification of military records to cover up weapons deals with enemy combatants. 3 of my teammates died because he sent us into a trap to eliminate witnesses to his corruption. I placed additional files on the table, financial records showing irregular payments to overseas accounts, communication logs proving Harrison's contact with arms dealers, witness statements from soldiers who'd survived other failed operations under his command. The slap Admiral Harrison delivered on my wedding day wasn't punishment for past failures. It was meant to intimidate a witness to ongoing crimes. He thought public humiliation would silence me before I could expose what I knew. Harrison tried to speak, but his voice cracked. That recording, it's taken out of context. Operational security required. I looked him directly in the eyes for the first time since he'd struck me. That slap was the last order you'll ever give me, sir. The tribunal lasted another 3 hours, but the outcome was determined in that moment when Harrison's voice played back his own corruption. By the end of the day, he was stripped of rank, relieved of command, and facing court-martial on charges of treason, conspiracy, and conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. I walked out of that room in full uniform, my head high, my honor restored. The reporters were waiting. They always are, shouting questions about justice and revenge and what comes next. I walked past them without comment, my silence more powerful than any statement. My parents were waiting in the car. My mother's head was still bandaged, but she was smiling. My father was crying, something I'd never seen before, tears of pride and relief and vindication. I didn't need his apology, I told them as we drove away from the Pentagon. I needed his silence. The formal hearing took place 6 weeks later. Harrison pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations into military corruption. He received a dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of all benefits, and 8 years in federal prison. I was reinstated with full honors, back pay, and a promotion to lieutenant commander. The Navy's public statement acknowledged serious procedural errors in my original suspension and praised my dedication to truth and justice under extreme circumstances. But the real victory wasn't the reinstatement or the promotion or seeing Harrison led away in handcuffs. It was sitting in that courtroom, watching my mother squeeze my father's hand, knowing that we'd fought back and won. Knowing that the next time a powerful man tried to destroy a woman's life, he might remember what happened to Admiral Harrison and think twice. The pain doesn't just disappear when justice is served. That slap still echoes in my dreams sometimes. I still feel the phantom sting across my cheek when I'm tired or stressed or facing another challenge. The humiliation, the shame, the violation of everything I believed about honor and respect, those wounds heal slowly, imperfectly, leaving scars that remind you of what you've survived. But I learned something important in those months between destruction and vindication. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, it just proves you survived it. And survival isn't about accepting what happens to you. It's about deciding what you're going to do about it. I didn't fight Harrison because of the slap. I fought because he thought I wouldn't. Because he looked at me on the worst day of my life and saw a victim instead of a warrior. Because he forgot that the same training that made me valuable on the battlefield would make me dangerous when I became his enemy. Every woman who's ever been told to sit down, shut up, know her place, we have a choice. We can accept the silence they try to impose on us, or we can speak so loudly that everyone hears. We can let their violence define us, or we can use it to fuel our fight for something better. The little girl who watched her parents renew their vows in that naval chapel grew up to become a woman who wouldn't let anyone steal her sacred spaces. The daughter who made her father proud when he pinned her first badge became the officer who made him prouder when she fought for what was right. The bride who stood bleeding in front of her wedding guests became the warrior who proved that justice delayed isn't justice denied, it's justice gathering strength. Harrison thought that slap would end my story. Instead, it just changed the ending. I'm Lieutenant Commander Claire Morrison, active duty Navy SEAL, wife, daughter, and the woman who proved that courage doesn't have a gender and justice doesn't have an expiration date. I wear my scars like medals, my pain like armor, and my victory like the uniform I almost lost, but never stopped deserving. If you were me, humiliated in front of everyone you loved, betrayed by someone you trusted, silenced by a system designed to protect the guilty, would you fight back or walk away? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story, because silence only helps the guilty and courage starts when you speak. The sound of that slap split my soul in two. But when the pieces came back together, they formed something stronger, something unbreakable, something worthy of the uniform I wear and the people I serve. That's not revenge, that's justice. And justice, real justice, always wins in the end, even when it takes a war to deliver it.